Hello everyone, this is Dr. Ilyas from the Department of Education, Hazara University. In my previous presentation, I discussed the what and why of literature review. And this presentation is in response to a number of questions from students who wanted me to discuss the when, how, and how much of literature review. So let's begin this one with the question of when. The question is, when should one start literature review? Well, research studies actually usually begin with a preliminary literature review. So the aim of this preliminary literature review at this stage is actually to search for possible areas and topics of research. So when the taught courses end, the first thing on the minds of the research students is what topic should I work on for my thesis? And so usually supervisors and professors and teachers tell them to begin with reading something related to areas of their interest. So here is what it actually begins. And then the one thing is actually in the beginning of literature review happens. Why? Because many researchers and research students want to consolidate their hypotheses or their preliminary research ideas and research questions and research objectives that they have in their mind. So this actually the preliminary research review literature review actually helps in consolidating those hypotheses and research questions and research objectives. Then this preliminary or the beginning, the literature review that takes place in the beginning of research studies actually help in the refinement and updating and focusing of the hypotheses and questions and objectives. Then also, this beginning literature review helps in identifying gaps for further explorations in the knowledge base. The third one is that it helps during the thesis or research process, which is not like the beginning thing, is actually to keep up to date. In many cases, you begin with preliminary research review, but then as you move on in during the data collection or analysis process, it happens that you need to, because it takes many months or months and sometimes several years to complete a PhD or MPhil study. So that's why the researcher or the student researcher actually needs to keep up to date with what is happening during this time. I mean, in terms of the coming up literature that is getting published. And then the next thing is to do possible readjustment to research design, research objectives, and research questions. In many cases, it happens that during the course of a research study, a researcher actually finds that some other researchers have come up with a particular research study that is quite similar to their own research questions and objectives and research design. And so there is need for some readjustment at this stage, and so that is something that helps during the process of the research thesis. Again, this during the thesis, literature review helps in improving data collection, analysis, and also in locating data sources. Then further, this actually helps in revisiting or confirming initial understandings related to main themes of the research. Sometimes you have studied something in the beginning of your thesis, but later on you come to later on during the process of the thesis, you come across empirical data that actually takes you that develops your understanding, and so you need to confirm or to revisit your initial ideas related to particular themes. And for that, you need this during the course of research process, literature review. And so let's move to the next thing, the next points in the when category. So overall, the earlier you begin, the better. But however, such things, the when question depends also on the nature of research and the quality and the amount of literature available. In some cases, there is rich and detailed literature available. And in some cases, the previous literature is skimpy. So that will also actually decide on when to begin the literature review. Then we have the when also depend on the nature of the research design. If it's a kind of explanatory, confirmatory, and in many cases, like the case with the most quantitative studies, in that case you will need more research literature review in the beginning. However, if it's a kind of exploratory or inductive research design that the researcher is following, in that case, maybe there is less literature needed in the beginning of the study. And so the next thing for which you actually, the when question, is that you also need literature review or kind of updating your literature review towards the end of your study in order to critically analyze your findings in the light of this expanding literature review that happens during the course of the study. One of the questions is when to stop reviewing the literature. In other words, how much amount when is enough? This is also an important question, and again, the answer to it is not a simple one. It will vary according to the nature or the design of your research study, and it will also vary in the level of your thesis, and also it will vary in line with the length, the required length in terms of words or in terms of pages. So if you are doing a PhD study, maybe you need to go into more detail of the literature. But if you are doing an MPhil or a master level degree thesis, in that case, you might decide, or maybe with the help of your supervisors, or you might have instructions from your institution. So it depends on a number of things, the when to stop. Usually the researcher actually can decide when to stop, keeping in view the time available with them and the objectives of the research and the research questions and a number of other important considerations. Then the next thing is how question, how to do a literature review. Well, initially one must read whatever is available as a general introduction to an understanding of the topic. So initially, because you don't have a very good idea of where you are actually going, especially in exploratory studies, so whatever you get in the beginning, whether it's something available on the internet or something available in kind of documents or research papers or thesis or wherever, you must read that in the beginning. This will get more focus as one gets increasing familiarity with the topic and its main themes and sub-themes. In the light of the work of most prominent contributors to the topic, again, this is how you can actually focus. How you can focus your study is to actually recognize individually or with the help of supervisors the most prominent contributors in the topic in which you are working. And again, you can focus your literature review in the light of your research questions and objectives. So the next thing is some of the main sources. The how question also is kind of relevant to this one, that research papers, articles, reports, that are basically peer reviewed and published and having good quality and published in prominent journals. So it's a good thing if we go for those papers who are actually more authentic in terms of being peer reviewed and published in high quality journals. And the second thing is increasing insights into prominent contributors. This will actually help you in who are the prominent contributors in the area in which you are working. Then, besides journals and research papers, you can also go for books. There are merits and demerits of reading books for literature review. The merits is that it gives you more detailed insights, especially if you read books of by well-established publishers. But there could be demerits of it as well, keeping in view the time that you have for. So you have to decide on maybe selectivity of the particular parts of the bigger books that you need to focus on. And then a range of sources in terms of timeline. This is something that you need to decide how much of the older and fundamental works you need to include in your study and how much of the current. So there should be both of these kind of sources. Again, you can decide on the basis of your own critical thinking, but you can also involve and take the advice of your advisor or supervisor or maybe seniors on deciding how much of what type of sources you need to include in your literature review. Then one very fundamental and interesting question was that how to be more critical, how not to be more descriptive. Because many supervisors will ask you that you have just referred to this one and that one, and so your literature review is quite at the descriptive level. So you need to go into a more critical level of this literature review. So the question is how to be critical, how to be more critical. To be critical rather than descriptive, most important and most difficult question, that is the question. But I think it depends on a number of things. You can be more critical only if you have depth of knowledge, and for that you need to read a lot. And so the earlier you begin, the better. The second thing is that the range of readings, usually related to a topic, there is a huge range of readings, and so the more you have the range of readings around your area, the better you will be to be more critical, because you will know the different angles in which that topic has been discussed and presented and analyzed by different authors. The next thing in becoming more critical rather than descriptive is to be committed. So you are committed and you go for more analysis and you go for questioning yourself and questioning the text that you are reading. So your commitment is quite important in this. You are not doing this literature review just for the sake of it. You are doing it for actually becoming more and more critical and kind of becoming more and more scholarly related to your topic. So your commitment is quite important. Then the time that you have is also very important. Most research courses and theses are time bound. So you have to decide on that, and you have to adjust your speed of reading and your level of analysis of those readings according to your time. And again, the next factor that actually comes in deciding on the level of criticality of your literature review is like, for example, there is usually, not always, but in many cases, there will be literature review that is less on the critical level and more on the descriptive level on the lower levels of education. But if you are doing an MPhil or a PhD thesis, in that case, you need to be more critical and more original and more analytical in terms of presenting your